everyone, welcome to More Than Medals by Crossing the Line. Today we're going to be talking with Greg Stewart, who's a two-time Paralympic champion in shot put. But Greg's only career in sport isn't in the Paralympic side. Greg competed in able-bodied sport for several years. I won't ruin the lead and let you know exactly what sports Greg has participated in, but it's interesting to hear Greg talk about his experience both in para and in able-bodied sport. I'm excited for Greg to tell you more about it. Here's Greg Stewart. So Greg Stewart is a two-time Paralympic champion in shot put and has placed second in shot put at Para World Championships twice. And when I was learning more about Greg, I was surprised to learn that your experience in sport is actually really diverse, more so than what I was expecting. Greg played varsity basketball at Thompson Rivers University and was a member of Canada's national sitting volleyball team. And of course, most recently became the 2024 Paralympic champion in shot put at the Paris Games. Thanks so much, Greg, for being here. I am already excited in the Googling I have done to learn more about you, so I'm really excited to hear you talk about it.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, super excited to be here. And yeah, I would definitely say I have a pretty diverse sporting background. I actually started to compete in disabled sports around the age of 15. So for those that don't know, I was born missing my left arm below the elbow. And then I was, lucky enough or had the genes to grow extremely tall. So I'm 7'2" and currently weigh around 360 pounds. So I'm a very large human. But also, so I have the advantage of being really tall, but I have the disadvantage of being a disabled athlete, or so they say. So, yeah. Yeah,
you're so unique physically that I think it must have been different growing up in sport. I feel like a lot of people have sort of like an athlete that comes before them and is like as tall as they are, or is, somewhat similar, or even their disability is similar. And it must have been really unique for you. Did you have like role models like that in sport? Was there someone that you were like, oh, they do this similarly to me?
Not really. I kind of just my life, I grew up, my dad was in the RCMP. And so we transferred a lot. We're talking about it this morning in training, and I've moved about 11 times in my life. So
oh my gosh.
I've moved a lot, I've seen a lot, and I've got to experience a lot of different cultures and understanding of how people go about doing their daily lives. And so in a way, like having a role model might have been a little bit challenging because every environment, surroundings was new. And one of the things I learned about myself growing up as a child is that I struggled with commitment because I knew I was going to leave. And so I don't think I had a lot of role models in this age because I wouldn't commit to having one.
Right.
For the fear of maybe getting hurt or attaching myself to that. Having that said, if I were to say who my role model is, it would be my dad. My dad and I are very close. My whole family and I are quite close. But my dad growing up, you're teaching us in his line of work about the importance of treating others with respect, learning about one another, helping when things are really challenging. My dad definitely did an excellent job of supporting our family, both like mentally, and lovingly. But yeah, like I would say oftentimes, so when I was 14 years old, I was 6'8". I was quite a tall teenager.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a tall teenager. So I was a big kid, a tall kid. I wasn't that big. I was like 170 pounds and a skinny little guy. My mom would explain that I'm as skinny as a rake. So I was tall and skinny, but yeah, often, I heard these conversations. Hey, you should do this. Hey, you should do that. Hey, you should play basketball. You should play volleyball. But I could always feel the hesitation after the comment. Hey, you should play basketball.
And then they'd be like, oh, but this thing.
But yeah, can he do this? He has one arm. Can he actually, is that possible?
Can I just say something that is maybe rude or that would make this person uncomfortable?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like we're trying to bring love, we're trying to bring, acceptance and whatnot. But then we finish it with like the question mark.
That look on your face.
Totally. Whereas honestly, if we didn't see that, like, so where I'm going with this, if we didn't see my arm as a disability, it'd be an exclamation point, not a question mark. It'd be like, hey, you should play basketball. Right. And I think, I know we're going to go into this deeper, but when we are able to see ourselves for our differences, we start to recognize that we're all different. And that when we are seeing people for their differences, we're treating everybody with the same amount of respect. And I think that's something that, I don't know if you're learning it or not, being newer to the para world, but whether you're a triathlete or a shot putter, it doesn't matter, right? We're still human beings. We're still going out there. I don't see you in a chair. I just see you as a hard competitor, right? Yeah, I might be able to run a little bit faster, but, we don't see that piece of it. So recognizing our differences, seeing our differences, has, made myself more accepting of who I am. And I think is a result to my success as well.
I think you as just physically are such a cool example of this, because I feel like that I don't know what the stats are, and maybe but you are, I think, beyond this typical range of height, right? Like you would say this, if someone were to look at an athlete, especially for like a sport, like you mentioned, like basketball or volleyball, where height is an advantage, I feel like a person would say you have this natural advantage. And then I think a person might, or the tendency would be to see that you have an arm impairment and then to say like, oh, you have this natural disadvantage. And so it's probably a really interesting experience to kind of be in some ways on both ends of that spectrum of people being like, oh, you're so lucky you're tall. And then maybe you're unfortunate that your body is different in this way, when really, I don't think that we should see things so black and white. And I feel like you're kind of in one person, a really cool example of how it isn't that way. Like, it's not as though disabled athletes is this big sad thing, or as though our advantages are also different from each other. I think we are all very diverse. And it's funny because when people talk about an athlete, like if people say like, oh, you're good at volleyball, but you're not really very tall, like nobody acts really uncomfortable or acts like that's like a horrible thing to say. They just say it. And maybe there are sports that would be difficult for you to do, but I would imagine that if someone were to say that, they would say it very uncomfortably. They wouldn't just sort of say like, oh, your body might have a harder time doing this. And I think that's like one of those sad distinctions with disability that people kind of are uncomfortable with, that I don't think they should be.
So the one unique thing about being disabled, and this is something that I've learned, is that we're really just a reflection of the other person's discomfort. Mm-hmm. Right? When people are looking at us, they're seeing like the successes that we're having at these games, the everyday lives, all that kind of stuff. All they're seeing is a reflection of, man, like, that's me when I struggle. Mm. That's my difficulties. They're just doing it differently, but they are a prime example of doing it differently because there's no other way for them to do it. And so as an able-bodied person, it's hard to share and reflect that with other people's or struggles if you can't physically see it, where we're doing it on a regular basis and they're seeing it. Right. And so that reflection piece is, one, uncomfortable. No one wants to deal with it because it's uncomfortable. It's vulnerable. And second, they don't actually know how to communicate it because it's so uncomfortable. And we do an excellent job of pulling it out of people. Oh, here, let me help you with that. Oh, hey, do you need support this way? Just kind of always in that field of support. And then there's this conversation of para athletes being like, I don't need your support. Right? I just want to be treated just like everybody else. Wherein, in fact, we are just like everyone else. We're just seen physically different.
It's really interesting what you touched on there is something that I noticed is really different for myself from being an able-bodied person to being noticeably disabled. Like, as a wheelchair user, everyone sees it. It's, like you stand out. And what I did notice is that the way that people talk to me is in a lot of ways different. But one of the things that I noticed that people do at a really high frequency compared to before I was injured is they really tell me these like personal tragedies and these personal struggles. Like, people are very forthcoming with this like information about either sometimes about disabled people and their families, which kind of like I understand the connection, but then sometimes like mental health struggles or all of these like different things that a person has gone through that they tell me, which isn't something I had experienced really before. And I think it's interesting that in some ways people sort of see like they think they see one of the more difficult aspects of a disabled person's life because they can see their impairment. And then they feel this connection to this other challenge in their own lives, which I think is sort of an interesting phenomenon. Do you find that happens to you, that people like divulge these things?
It is endless. But I also I talk a lot about mental health. I talk about the importance of vulnerability and, showing your true self, showing your reality. Right. So if that's something I talk about and I'm open about, in a way, it creates that safe space so other people can have that conversation. Whereas as just a disabled person, they see the struggle so that they would see it as, okay, well, if they're struggling, obviously they're struggling, they're in a wheelchair, right? They might not be struggling at all, but now it's like, hey, the struggle piece is real. The scenario is different, but the struggle is real. Mm-hmm. That's a safe space. I'm going to share with you how challenging it can be. And you're like, that was unsolicited. I didn't ask for any of this. Why are you sharing this with me? Right. But it's just like, it's because we're safe spaces because we are showing, we are identifying the disability, the struggle. And they're like, oh, finally, we have something in common. When in reality, like if you think how able-bodied just go about day to day, the only way they can show that they're struggling is by talking about it. Like, how else do you show it? You have a limp, you walk different, like that sort of thing, right? How can you show that you're different? Whereas it's very evident. You're in a chair, you have one arm, the person has one leg, right? So,
yeah, it's interesting. You, beyond being an athlete, you do a lot of work in advocacy in general, and then also. I noticed that you had recently released a book. Do you want to talk about Stand Out?
Yeah, absolutely. So after winning in Tokyo in 2021, wasn't a friend at the time, but a friend now, reached out to me. Sean Campbell is his name. He's a editor and publisher and author. He has a series of books called Stand Out. This was the second of it. And it's all about athletes that just have, fun, perhaps incredible stories that can create connection that people can relate to. And his first book, Stand Out, was about a AHL hockey player named AJ Baines, who's from Kamloops, where I'm from, who was diagnosed with, I believe, type 1 diabetes. And just learning to understand his diagnosis, acceptance, that whole piece, to being a very successful AHL hockey player. So then after I had competed in Tokyo and had won, he reached out to me. He's just, I love your story. You talk a lot about mental health, sense of belonging, everything like that. How would you feel about writing a children's book? And so, yeah, we came together here about a year and a half ago and created the book Stand Out, the true story of Paralympic gold medalist Greg Stewart. And honestly, it's all about finding your sense of belonging, right? It just follows my journey growing up to that gold medal and just how I didn't feel quite right inside. It didn't matter how much I did. I never felt fulfillment. I never felt as much joy as I thought I was going to get out of it, to a point where it's self-acceptance by being supported by many other people, teaching that we don't have to do this alone, to the point of good coaching, good commitment, good training, and throwing a Paralympic record and becoming a Paralympic champion. So yeah, it's an awesome book. I'm super, super glad that we got together. I'm super glad that we're talking about vulnerability. That's a lot what the book is focused around, is, learning to be vulnerable with ourselves, but also learning and teaching the importance of failure so that we can continue to grow and be a better version of ourselves. So yeah, that's Stand Out.
About the importance of failure, one of the things that really comes up for me is that I feel like it's easier for me to be brave having a disability than it was before, because I did have to learn everything again. And so becoming paralyzed, you have to learn how to do triathlon, you have to learn how to swim again, you have to learn how to get dressed again, like all of these things that you have to learn again. And you were forced to fail in order to do them. And then I became so much less afraid of having like a lack of success or just doing something and it being a total mess, or like really publicly failing at something, like falling in public, or like having these kind of embarrassing things. And so I'm curious that's obviously a more distinct kind of turning point for someone in my situation. How did you come to this? Like, it seems like you have spent a lot of time thinking about mental health and have really decided on things that are helpful to you, but how did that come about? Did you struggle when you were younger? Like, did you feel like you were on the opposite side of the spectrum, or has it just always been interesting to you?
Yeah, I definitely struggled early. That, again, that's why we wrote the book, because of the reality of the struggle of being a kid, right? Trying to fit in, trying to, find this sense of belonging, who we are and all that, not being able to find joy or fulfillment. So I think where a lot of it stemmed from is when I played university basketball, like we had stated at the beginning, as an able-bodied athlete. I wore a prosthetic when I did it. And I was a really successful athlete. My last year, I was the top defensive player in the country under U Sport, or CIS is what it was called then. But when I finished school, my identity was attached to that. I was like identifying as Greg, the basketball player, not Greg. Mm. And there was about 2 years there, from about 23 to 25, where I was just like, who the heck am I? Like, I'm not a basketball player anymore. I'm like just working. I'm just, Office Bob is how I was feeling. I didn't know who I was. And I finally kind of hit that rock bottom piece that we all often talk about, just kind of overwhelmed with the emotions of not knowing what's going on and just feeling angry and tired and lonely and all that, that I finally reached out for help, reached out for support, did group therapy for 6 months. And in that time, when I was 25 years old, I finally saw myself for Greg, and I finally accepted myself for being disabled. I'm really
interested that you would mention that, because that really stood out to me actually just from hearing your story, as like it would be such a difficult, perhaps to me, transition to go from able-bodied sport to parasport. And I know a lot of athletes do it in sort of different ways, but to have the same body competing in able-bodied sport and then have the same body competing in parasport, and trying to kind of rectify those two identities, which I think aren't as different as society wants us to think they are, but in sort of the environment that we're in, I think we're made to feel really different. Was it hard for you to go from able-bodied sport to parasport? Like, did it feel different?
It is still extremely challenging. Yes, I've had a lot of success in para, but my ego will tell me, yeah, but you're just para. Wow. Like I will still treat myself the odd time where I'm like, yeah, you're a Paralympian. You're not an Olympian. You're not the top. And I think that's a little bit of like imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. I think that's just a little bit of, it's very humanizing. Right. It's just a reminder that, we're still human, and we have these thoughts, we have these feelings, we have these emotional experiences, and they're okay. That's okay. You can have these thoughts. It's just whether or not you want to act on them or not. And so, yeah, sometimes I'm in that space, but then I also remember I'm like, but I'm also just Greg, and Greg's done really incredible things. And he has incredible support. He's got a beautiful wife, and he's got incredible, staff and coaches and friends. And Greg is just Greg. And Greg has a disability, and his disability is a superhero power. That is what allows him to do all the things he did. Greg wouldn't have been at the Paralympics if he had two hands. Who knows where Greg would have been? Greg probably wouldn't be talking about mental health if he had two hands.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that self-acceptance, or something that I've been having this conversation a lot with a lot of people, is instead of fighting the fight, I'm just accepting it.
Mm-hmm.
And then by accepting it, I don't have to fight it anymore, and I can just allow it to be.
Right.
And
Like
and I was
allowing
gonna,
it to be challenging to deal with those feelings of sometimes feeling like I'm a world champion and then sometimes feeling like I'm not sure how I feel about being in this category.
absolutely. Like, I'm a two-time Paralympic champion. Oh, but you're not an Olympian. I'm not going to fight the fact that I'm not Olympian. I'll just be like, you're right, I'm not.
Correct.
Right. And I don't know about you, and it might be a question for you, is how did you find that? Because, I train at a physio clinic,
Mm-hmm.
and we have people coming in with spinal cord injuries or, new amputees. And it's a constant conversation around, yeah, but I was this. Yeah, but I was that. Yeah, but it was this. Or I want to get right back. I just got to get back at it. I got to get back to doing it. Da, 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 da. And it's like, but you can't.
Yeah. Like you genuinely won't do anything the same. I think for me, when you talk about kind of like accepting disability, it's interesting when people sort of talk about the words surrounding disability, because I think there's a lot of emphasis on the need to use the right words, which I agree is important. But at the same time, there was times when like I didn't feel like disabled described me. And now I do. But I had been able-bodied my whole life, and now all of a sudden there's this word that meant something to me at that time, but it didn't mean me. Like it just didn't feel like a word that was used to describe me. It's like if someone just changed your name and just said like, this is your name now. It's like, it's just a name, who cares? But it takes time to take on like a new anything. And so definitely those parts of it were really difficult. And I always say to people that I feel more similar to my able-bodied self than I am different. And so when society maybe and individuals wanted to treat me differently in all kinds of different ways, it was really weird for me to experience that, because I felt exactly the same. And I was like, why would you talk to me differently than you did yesterday or in previous times, when I feel so much the same person, just with an ability that in the grand scheme of things, like I definitely didn't feel like this at the time, but I've been injured for 6 years, and 6 years later feels like not that big of a deal, if you know what I mean. Like I don't walk, but like, does that matter that much on the day to day? Like if you and I went for a walk, we would both be able to go there together. So it's funny because these things like really felt like really important when I was first injured. And I think part of the reason why pursuing triathlon specifically was so important to me is because it is a sport that consists of like 3 things that you maybe wouldn't assume a wheelchair user could do. And I guess I've just come to a point where almost everything that I would really want to do, I've found a way to do it. And so now it seems unimportant that I'm doing it while seated and someone else is doing it while standing.
I think there's just real importance about like embodying something. I gave a talk last night to my wife's soccer academy, and I had asked, the initial question was, who here wants to be successful? And then everybody puts their hand up. And then my next question, who here is successful? And very little people put their hand up.
Oh,
and the reason I'm asking you, sorry?
That's so heartbreaking.
Oh,
people feel that way.
But it's normal. Like, I think coming from an athlete point of view, especially at high performance, I think it's different. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about, kids from U10 to U18 and then their parents, one, I think people are scared to admit their success. I think is one. I think we're Canadians. We're pretty humble. But at the same time, too, there's an importance to embodying success. And what I mean by that is if you want to be successful, you have to act successful. Right now, there's, of course, a lot more to it. There's commitment, there's consistency, perseverance, resiliency, all of that kind of stuff. But surround yourself with successful people. Do things that you feel brings you success. Right? And if you don't think you're successful, you'll never be successful. And again, maybe that's where I get this, I'm not an Olympian. Right? I'm sure I go down that road, but I can also be like, no, I'm not. And I'm okay with that. but I'm an amazing Paralympian. But then my other piece to that whole story is, if you want to bring love to yourself or others, you need to possess love. Like, you need to be a loving person. And I always use the example, like you can see my phone. I'm like, Leanne, like, take my phone. Right? If we were next to each other, you could receive my phone. There you go. Boom, you got it. But then I could be like, here, take my phone. Like, you can't, because I don't have it. I don't possess it. So when we say we're putting in the work, or we say that we love somebody, or we're saying that we're showing commitment, yet we're not, what are we actually giving to it? If I'm going to say I'm going to love you with all my heart, yet I don't show love to myself, what am I giving you, Leanne? Am I giving you my stress, my discomfort, my insecurities, all that kind of stuff? If you aren't it, it's going to be really hard to show it. And so that we need to start looking internally at who we are so that we could develop externally the things around us.
That makes a lot of sense. I've never heard that positioned in that exact way, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, makes sense. Yes.
I pivot a little bit. I listened to something to Instagram reel that you posted that I really loved. And it was in August of 2024, so just before the games. And you were talking about athletes, Paralympic athletes, or Paralympic athletes are athletes who were going to the Paralympics in 2024. And they were sort of promoting the games, but the way that they did it didn't really resonate with you. Like, they were sort of talking about, like, people should watch the games to demonstrate how cool they are, like, to demonstrate the validity of Paralympic athletes. And in your video, you kind of said that you didn't love that because you felt like you shouldn't need to be validating yourself through someone else, or like having someone else approve of what you're doing in order for it to be valid. And I thought it was an interesting concept in that it reminded me of something that's always kind of been a challenge for me in terms of advocacy, in that I don't always agree with every brand of advocacy. And I wonder if this is something that you've come across, and that there's people who promote a message that, in support of the Paralympic movement or different types of things like that, but the way that they do it doesn't sit with you. Is there a way that you approach advocacy? Is there things that you're like, oh, I love this, I don't love this?
Yeah, just show love and empathy, right? Show compassion. You don't have to love, you don't have to agree with everything, but they're also not wrong, right? It's okay that people have differences. That's what makes us human beings. That's the importance of our opinions. But it's recognizing where it's coming from. So I often talk about divine versus ego. Your ego is going to want to prove to yourself and the other person that they're wrong, whereas the divine will just accept them for who they are. They can share all they want. Yeah, you might have to have some conversations with them just to kind of try to understand where they're coming from, but it doesn't mean they're wrong. Yes, there's some blatant stuff out there. You're just like, hey, I don't even want to be a part of that.
Right.
I think one of the conversations that constantly happens between Olympians and Paralympians is, are we Paralympians or are we just Olympians?
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? Because guaranteed you've been called an Olympian, guaranteed. Right. And I get it all the time. Oh, look, it's an Olympic champion. I'm like, oh no, it's not an Olympic champion. Paralympic. There's a big difference there. Or is there a big difference?
Yeah. What do you think? Is there a big difference? Like, how does it feel to you? Does one feel right and the other feel less right?
Yeah. So my ego would say it feels right. And I say that because that's the challenging parts that I have when I'm like, am I an Olympian or a Paralympian? Like, am I like, oh, you're not an Olympian. But you telling me I am proves my ego right. Whereas, hey, you're Olympian. Well, no, I'm actually a Paralympian and I've worked really hard for that. That is a more divine place. It's coming from a loving place. Oftentimes, the most loving things are the most vulnerable and uncomfortable ones.
That makes sense.
Because when we're experiencing vulnerability, we're experiencing growth. And it's not always easy growth, but it's an opportunity for us to perhaps see something different and perhaps change the way we think, change our experiences, because we react to things in our lives based on the experiences and outcomes and whatever. But then we experience this vulnerability and we allow a little bit more acceptance. That reaction we were having in the beforehand might actually be able to alter it now based on the new vulnerable experience. And so if it's coming from a more divine place, yes, I'm a Paralympian and I'm very proud of it. If you want to call me an Olympian, depending on how I'm feeling, I might change and be like, I'm a Paralympian, not an Olympian. Or, hey, if you, in your eyes, I'm an Olympian or Paralympian, but you want to call me an Olympian, I'm not going to take that away from you.
Yeah, so I think the intention is always so important. And I think that 99% of the time, when someone calls you one or the other, the intention is respect, totally. And to acknowledge your accomplishment. And so sometimes, even though you might want to bring more attention toward the Paralympics by saying I'm a Paralympian, sometimes I don't correct someone because I don't want to change the effect of what they're trying to say. Because I think sometimes I feel like it's distracting to change the topic of the conversation when what this person is trying to do is maybe just introduce you and say they appreciate what you've done in sport, which I think it can be distracting to then go back and say, actually, I'm this, but, or sometimes it really feels like the right thing to do. And then I do.
Absolutely. And it also might just be them recognizing, wow, what a commitment to your sport. Wow, I couldn't imagine putting in that kind of work.
Right.
Wow, good for you. I'm really proud of the work that you're putting in. You're an incredible Olympian.
Recently, you did put a video on your social media talking about the changes in the funding for the Olympics and Paralympics for Paris 2024. So prior to Paris 2024, Canadian athletes who medaled in the Paralympic Games didn't get the same prize money as Canadian athletes who medaled in the Olympic Games. Can you talk about what it was like for you to have experienced both sides of that, to win in a Games and not have that equality in that regard, and then to win in a Games and have that same prize money? Like, how did that feel to you on both sides?
Absolutely. I made the joke in a CBC sports thing the other day. When I won my first Paralympic gold medal in Tokyo, I was lucky to get a handshake. Whereas, yes, as of March of 2024, the Malavia Foundation, Paralympic Foundation, and I think the Canadian Olympic Foundation, there's three of them that are involved, now put money together to support Paralympic athletes and their medals. And so, yeah, obviously big difference, very big difference. $20K for a gold medal, 15 for silver, 10 for bronze. That pays for a wheelchair for you. Right. So like big difference there. I think it's great in the sense of getting the recognition. Again, going back to like just kind of seeing us all for who we are versus the differences of us. So I think it's great for that. I think it's adding more to the sport in general, because I joke about it, but I would say Paralympians for a long time were competing for their passion projects because there wasn't the incentive in it. There still isn't in terms of like sponsorships and stuff like that. I know we have to work a lot harder for that, especially Canadians. Those two things. But like, it's great. We're moving in the right direction. I don't know about you, but when you received yours, like, it was like, wow, like, this is cool. A little bit more of incentive to, maybe I'm going to try a little harder next time. Or work on my technique. Maybe you don't have to try as hard, but yeah, change my technique or take more rest or do what I can to ensure that I can continue to compete. So yeah, having the money is great. However, money also, in my opinion, changes the view for a lot of things. Things become a lot more political when you include money in it, right? And so I guarantee there's going to be some ups and downs coming up. But overall, I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful that we're seeing the same in many people's eyes. And I think there's just importance to now really growing our sports and making them better and, encouraging the youth, the grassroots programs to come together and build, exceptional athletes so we can remain competitive, on a global scale.
Is that something that you spend time on or focus your energy on is kind of athlete development, or do you work in that side of athletics?
I don't, other than what I already talk about.
Yeah. So then,
right? Yeah. So I think that if we can teach ourselves and others to love themselves, to accept themselves, to recognize their differences and how important they are, we'll create and generate more, right? You are the reflection of your surroundings. You want to enjoy, love, and have peace and success, be that and embody it. If you want to have more competitors, talk about it. I want more competitors, right? I want to see more Canadian, Paralympic shot putters out there. There's 2 or 3 or 4 of us, right? In my classification, there's multiple other classes out there, but come try it. Right? If you don't talk about it, you might never know.
Yeah, for sure. How did you come across para-athletics specifically, and why shot put?
Great question. The long-winded short story of it, I was at a Christmas party, came across a gentleman in a Team Canada shirt in a wheelchair. And from my experience in the past playing the disabled volleyball, I was like, I bet you this is Team Canada of some sort. Anyways, came back from the washroom. That guy now turned into 4 or 5 other people, exchanged numbers, had a good conversation. And because I'm from Kamloops is where Dylan Armstrong, the Olympic shot putter, is from.
Cool.
I ended up working with Dylan. He was my coach for my first 4 years.
That's so fun. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So everything just kind of fell in my lap, and I was like, a no-brainer. And when I was playing on our disabled volleyball team, we never made it to the Paralympics.
Okay.
And I was like, this might be an opportunity for me to get myself to the games.
Yeah.
And we just, Dylan said something very, very great at the beginning of us working together. It's like, hey, I will support you. I will train you. Just show up. If you don't want to show up, don't come. And I was like, okay.
I love that.
Yeah. And I did it because I wanted to do it, not because I was tall or because I had one arm. It's just because I enjoyed throwing.
Yeah. I feel like there's something so cool about that sometimes is kind of missed in parasport, where you have an impairment and then people sort of introduce you to the sport that typically exists for your impairment. So for me, people were like, oh, you should play wheelchair basketball. And I'm so bad, just not good. And I just didn't feel I like to play it for fun. That's not fair to say, but I wasn't excited about it in the same way. I didn't when I trained for triathlon, endurance sport in general is long and sort of rigorous training, and the training in and of itself. And I think probably the same for shot put. It's not always so satisfying as playing basketball or some team sports where you're we're playing with our team. We're obviously training and doing drills and working really hard, but there's something fun about playing a sport versus how heavy is a shot put ball?
I throw a 13 and a half. Yeah, I throw a 13 and a half pound shot put. So 6 kilo.
Well, that is, to most people, it's harder to see the intrinsic reward in that. And I think the same with biking, when you're on the bike for your second hour of the day kind of thing. It doesn't feel always fun. But then for me, with triathlon, and it sounds like maybe for shot put, for you with shot put, there was just something about it that you were I like to do this. It makes me feel good.
That's it. I just feel good.
Yeah.
What more do you want, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think then it also is kind of reassuring in the sense that if you're somehow not as successful as you obviously were, you still did the right thing. Do you think about that? What if you didn't win?
Man, I think about that all the time. And I don't want to jinx myself here, but I don't want to win next time. I do. I do.
You want to get beat. You want someone to be good enough, maybe, like that the field is so competitive.
Yeah, like I would love for me to go out there and all of a sudden have 4 or 5 guys throwing 17 meters. I'll be like, holy cow, this is amazing. Yeah. We are now competitive. Like, wow, this is amazing. Of course I want that. But then I also want to throw 18 meters. So I'll be like, oh, sorry, guys. But so the 2 days before I competed in Paris, I'm just off topic a little bit, but it brings it back. Were the worst 2 days I've ever experienced as an athlete, period.
Wow.
I was going back to the divine or ego, I was an ego. And the ego was, you're a failure. You're not good enough. You're the defending champion. Pressure's on, buddy. You better do your best. If not, you're letting your team down. You're letting yourself down.
Aww.
I was like, oh my gosh, like what's going on here? And I was like, man, like this is terrible. Like, I don't like, and it was brutal. Thank God we have, I'm sure you guys have a sports psych or at least access to one.
We do.
Penny Worthner, who we deal with, excellent job of, and I'm saying this correctly, pushing me off the cliff. I say that because we're feeling it. If we step back, it prevents us from feeling it all the way.
Right.
And so she helped me push myself off so I could experience, in this case, I was crying and upset and stuff like that. But she helped me feel it so then I could be like, okay, I'm ready to go. So then when I got there on September 4th, when I competed, I was ready to go. I was like, hey, I felt everything. Let's go and do this. Right. I just went out there and did it. And I just competed and I had fun. And then my competitors threw like 6 centimeters behind me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I still beat you. But man, you guys are getting better. Like, this is amazing. Let's keep doing this. Like, yeah. But where the conversation was is part of that 2 days, my coach and I said it and thought about it a few times. What would make my story great is if I lost. Because then I could share about like being a defending champion, being a Paralympic champion, to competing, to doing my best and failing. Like so many, all of us can relate to that. But then you go and win, very few get that chance.
Mm-hmm.
But even though very few get to experience that, that's another story that you can share to help people experience that.
Yeah, I really feel like that makes a lot of sense. And even though you didn't lose, which I'm glad that didn't happen, I still feel like you can get that experience from like the so many failures that it takes to become an athlete at the Paralympics. Like for myself, prior to 2024, like my 2023 season, I literally messed up in competition every way that you can think of to mess up a triathlon. Like it was like I was trying. Like in the test event, for the games, our swim was canceled, but I'm strong in the run. And so we were kind of excited for an opportunity to try our event as a duathlon. So instead of swim, bike, run, we would run, bike, run. And so I'm leading in the test event. And then I turned the wrong way, like to do an extra lap of our first run that I didn't need to do. And so as not a very experienced athlete at that time, like I had never been to a games, I'm leading in the test event of the games, and then I go the wrong way. And then another time I swam the wrong way in a race. I crashed multiple times in races, and like silly mistakes too. Like not just like I crashed because I like was cornering so fast, but once I crashed in the finish chute because I was so stressed that the athlete behind me would be able to close this, like now that I look at it, gap that she couldn't close, that I took a corner on like a wet carpet super fast and like almost ended up like back in the bay from my racing chair. So that could have been really bad. Wow. Like these kinds of mistakes was like my entire 2023 season. And so I feel like going into 2024, it was like, it looked like I could have been good, but I made so many mistakes. It was really hard to tell, like to really say like, could this athlete podium? Like, who knows, if she doesn't do something stupid, then maybe. And I feel like that was my most like transformative season in sport and sort of in life, is to have like so many mistakes happen and like on the world stage, and our races are like televised. Not a lot. My mom watches it. That's probably it. But still like to do these things, in front of someone. And I feel like it actually just made me so confident of a racer that I knew like the worst case scenario, like I would be okay though. You know, like I would mess this up and I would be mad at myself and disappointed. And then I would find a way to figure it out and to come back and to learn from it. And so I really do resonate with what you're saying when you talk about being open to failing, because I think that you actually become such a better athlete when that happens and you realize like it's actually okay.
Yeah, like there's no growth in comfort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you want to grow and get better, you got to be vulnerable and you got to be willing to make a mistake.
I also love that you're out here saying you're like looking for more competition. This happened to me in such a unique way. Kendall Gretsch is an athlete from the US who's a competitor of mine. And when a couple of years ago, she started asking if I wanted to train with her. And she was the Tokyo champion in paratriathlon. So I'm like, of course, but also like, why? Why do you want to train with me? And in a lot of ways, I feel like Kendall made me the athlete that I am so that she could make more competition for herself, because she wanted someone like breathing down her neck to push her to be a better athlete herself. Right. And I think it's just the coolest thing in para, that I think in sport in general, but really we see it in para, that people are wanting to like raise up this community because there's this passion for our sport, that we want the sport to be the best it can be. And I love hearing you talk about that, because it kind of makes me understand her perspective more, when sometimes I was like, why does she want to train with me? Why does she want to help me?
Well, the only way you again, this goes back to the very beginning. If you want to be successful, surround yourself with successful people.
Yeah, 100%. Right? Well, being coached by an Olympic shot putter who's also a champion, I think is helpful.
Totally. 100% it is. But it's just being able to recognize that, and recognizing that when someone is better than you, there's so much room for growth, but there's also so much room for like new ideas. Oh, I never thought about that. Oh, that new experiences. Like there's so many great things that come out of new challenging experiences. We need to encourage failure, and failure is not a bad thing. Guaranteed, when anybody says the word failure, they're like, ugh. Right? But it's like failure is like, oh, nice. We're either going to win or learn. This is how it goes. And in most cases, it's actually going to be learn and learn.
Yeah, right? For sure.
I would say, like, just a last little thing here. I would say one of the things that I struggle with is that, yes, I've won. And I've been really successful at what I've done, but I've lost a lot more than I've ever won. Mm-hmm. And I am so grateful for that. And if we can learn to just embody our failures, trust in our mistakes, and just own them, gosh, man, life is so much more enjoyable. There's so much more joy to our lives when we embody this discomfort. I wish I had the words, but I wish I could teach the feeling.
That feeling. Yeah. I am really interested actually to talk about on the podcast. One of the next athletes I'm going to be talking with is Stefan Daniel, who's a para-triathlete on my team and is a phenomenal athlete, multiple time world champion, just incredible in his field and has been for a really long time. And he was leading in Paris when he crashed. Like, not only is it absolutely terrifying to be going that speed and to crash onto cobblestone streets, but then he ultimately finished the race. And when I asked him about it, he said that if he got beat on that day, that he should finish because the athletes that beat him deserve to beat him. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was like, not only just like the most humble and coolest thing to hear someone say, but I feel like it's so inconsistent with this mentality that we have of like a champion and they want to win and they want to beat everybody. And I feel like it was just such a reflection of like how much respect athletes actually have for the sport and their competitors, that they are like, I want the best man or woman to win, whether it's me or whether it's someone else. And it feels like that's how you feel about it, that you're like looking for competition and wanting to always be having the best athlete win on the day, knowing that that might not always be you. Can you describe really quickly your experience in volleyball?
Volleyball, hey? So I actually played about 6 years on our national standing disabled team first. So just regular volleyball, arm amps, leg amps, that kind of thing, but they wore prosthetics. We were actually 3-time world champions, so had a lot of success there. But standing wasn't in the Paralympics, but seated was. Right. So then I made the transition to seated volleyball. And for anyone that doesn't know what seated volleyball is, it's literally you're sitting on the ground. The net's like 3 feet off the ground and you're playing volleyball, smaller court, everything like that. Loved it. Volleyball is still probably one of my favorite sports. I love playing it. I just need to get a little bit smaller in size because it's hard on my body. But volleyball is great. It taught me a lot about team chemistry, camaraderie, working together, building together. All of my team sports have taught me that. But volleyball is great just because there was a lot of like-minded people on it. I never made it to the Paralympics. So I had to go and do it on my own.
Is that something that is in the future for you, or do you have plans for the future? It looks like you're continuing in sport, I think in shot put, but.
Yeah, no, I'm sure like when I'm finally retired and just like focusing on, my wife and potentially a family and work and all that I'm sure I'll get back into playing a lot more rec league stuff.
Yeah.
The focus right now is to continue throwing. Like I said, I love it. My body for the most part is pretty healthy. I got some little ailing injuries here and there, but hopefully time will take care of those. Just keep going there. Again, I really want to support the Paralympic movement. I think it's really important that if you're sharing your story, it's easier to be in it than to view it from outside. And if I'm I'm a motivational speaker and whatnot. And so the importance of being a consistent athlete makes my job that much easier. So keep doing that, supporting people, loving people, letting them know that they're incredible. And that vulnerability is the key to success.
Speaking of loving people, you mentioned your wife. Your wife is a relatively new wife, is she not? Did you not get married?
She's my first wife and only wife. That's the plan. We got married back in September. So I competed on September 4th, won a gold medal. And then 3 weeks later, I won a gold medal for life. Taylor and I tied the knot.
So fun.
Side note, if you're planning to compete at the Paralympics and get married in the same month, maybe wait another month. I think it was great. Loved it. Loved everything about it. It was just a little stressful at times. So
I can imagine that would be a lot to be taking on all at once. But congratulations. That's so exciting.
Thank you. How about you? Are you engaged?
I'm married.
Married? You're married? Oh, you're married. Oh, okay, good.
I am. But I'm not wearing a ring. I never wear it. Triathlon and rings are.
I keep putting mine on my left hand, but it keeps falling off, so it's okay.
Stop. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm married, and we are hoping to. I want to continue to compete in 2028, but we really want to have a family first. So that's kind of like our next big goal is learning how to adapt training to hopefully being pregnant. And then ultimately I would love to go to LA as a mom. I think that would just be like the coolest experience.
Well, we should stay in touch because that is also a very similar plan. So
amazing.
Be an athlete and dad and mom. Oh, sleep.
A lot of hats.
Yeah, sleep. What? What's sleep? Athletes don't need sleep. Yeah.
Right. My sister just had my first niece in December, so I got to see her over Christmas, which was amazing. But I keep asking her these questions about like what it's really like, because your sister will actually tell you. And she told me yesterday she got 5 hours of sleep for the first time since her baby was born, like 5 consecutive hours of sleep. And I was like, how are you alive? I don't understand. So I'm nervous. But I'm excited as well. That's awesome. Well, congratulations on getting married, and I wish you the best of luck with the family. I think you'll be such a good dad.
Well, thank you.
Of course.
You'll be a great mom, so.
I hope so. Yeah. Thanks so much for being here. This was really fun. It's always nice to catch up with you. If people want to follow you, find you, interact more with you, can you talk a little bit about how they can do that? And maybe, I know you do some coaching services and the kinds of things that you offer.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram, Greg R. Stewart, Stewart. You can check out my website at www.themindfulleet. So it's TheMindFulete, short for the Mindful Athlete. Feel free to reach out there. Those are kind of my main plugs. If you want to look at speaking engagements, whatnot, feel free to reach out. The book is available online on Amazon, so anyone can seek it there. Stand Out, true story about Paralympic gold medalist me. So, Mind if you need anything, also follow, Leanne's story. Leanne, you're, like you said, you're 6 years since your injury and you're already a Paralympic bronze medalist, and the ceiling is, the sky is the ceiling for you. So keep doing what you're doing and supporting and loving other people. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here. It was so much fun.
Thanks so much, everyone, for listening to More Than Medals. That was Greg Stewart, an amazing athlete and such an interesting person to talk to. Thanks so much, Greg, for being here today, and catch us next time on More Than Medals.